I am LaVon Bracy, and I am the first African American to graduate from Gainesville High School in 1965. My mother was a school teacher, and before we moved to Gainesville, we lived in St. Augustine. And he was president of the NAACP in St. Augustine. Mom lost 2 jobs because of my dad's activities with the NAACP. So when we moved to Gainesville, he promised her that he would not do any more civil rights, and that lasted a hot minute. He then became president of the NAACP in Gainesville. And so Dad decided, let me see what the issues are. This is 1964. Brown versus Boyd was 1954. 10 years have passed. Gainesville is still segregated. So the NAACP decided to file a suit against the Alachua County School Board. They won the suit, and the judge said that they had to integrate with all deliberate speed. So Dad decided that, well, I have to find some students because I'm going to start at the high school rather than elementary. If you start at elementary, that's 12 years before graduation. He said, so I'm going to find 10th, 11th, and 12th graders. He knocked on about 500 doors. He found 1 10th grader, 1 11th grader, and no 12th graders. I was in the 12th grade. My brother was in the 12th grade. I was in the 12th grade because I skipped a grade. And I told my brother, I says, why don't we help Dad out? Because he's just so upset he can't find a senior. And my brother said, absolutely not. I am in the band. I have 3 girlfriends. I'm not giving up. I am not giving up my last year to go there. So I really anguished about it, and I told Dad, I'll go. My mother was livid. My mother said, absolutely not. You're not making a guinea pig out of my girl. No, no, no. And my dad kept on, and he kept telling her, I can't ask other parents and if I'm not willing to make the sacrifice that they're making. And he finally convinced her. She wasn't happy about it at all. And I talk about it in my book. She was not.
So tell me about the night before the first day of school.
The night before the first day of school, I did not sleep that night at all. I tossed, I turned, because I didn't know what to expect the next day. I said, oh, will they accept me? Will this be a good experience? I stayed up looking at the walls all night long. I was praying that things would work out. I got up real early. I was ready to go to school 2 hours ahead of time. Excuse me. I was ready to go to school 2 hours ahead of time. And Mom got up and fixed me a big breakfast, but I had balls in my stomach, couldn't eat anything. And my dad took all 3 of us, the 10th, 11th, and 12th grader. The FBI came to the house and said that it was going to be very dangerous and that they could not guarantee any protection. And they had come the week of trying to get my dad to change his mind and get the other 2 students not to go. And he says, we're going to have to do this. So the first day of school, it was all 3 of us. And 2 policemen, 1 car in the front, 1 car in the back, that escorted us to Gainesville High. And when we got to Gainesville High, my dad had prayer with us and told us he would wish us a very good day. Well, before I even get to my classroom, I'm called the N-word, I'm spit on. So I knew that I had a difficult time. So I get to the classroom. I sat on the first seat on the first row. Everybody gets up and go to the other side of the room. And the teacher says, why are you standing up? And they said, we rather stand than sit by the N-word. And so she said, well, you don't have to sit. And so they stood up, the whole class, rather than sit by me. Went to the cafeteria. Everybody left. went to the library, everybody left. It was like I had a infectious disease and nobody wanted to be around me. Oh yeah, I was beaten one day. What happened with that? A young man came to my house selling vacuum cleaners. And my dad asked him, said, "Young man, is this your full-time job?" He says, "No, I'm a senior at Gainesville High School." So Dad said, "Do you know my daughter?" He says, "Yes, I know of her." So he came in and he said in front of me and my dad that I know what they're doing to you at school. And I know who is the ringleader. And I can assure you that days are going to get better because I'm going to speak up for you. And so Dad said, "Did you hear that, LaVon? Things are going to get better for you. It's not going to be like it is." I said, "Okay." Well, he demonstrated the vacuum cleaner. And my mother was not home. And my dad says, "Listen, young man, LaVon will find you tomorrow and let you know if you need to come back and show my wife a demonstration of this vacuum cleaner." So when Mom came home and we told her, she says, "Well, if this vacuum cleaner can do all this, yeah, tell him to come back." So when school starts, at that time, everybody waits outside until the bell rings. So I found the young man and I got out the words, "My father told me." I didn't get to say anything else. He used the N-word. He says, "I don't know you." Threw me on the ground, and all of his friends came. And they beat me unmercifully. I was praying. I held my head and my face because I was trying to make sure that I didn't get any scars on my face. But I was bleeding from my head. So I waited till everybody went in. Not a person stopped while I was on the ground. And then I stumbled into the principal's office. And I said to the principal that I had been attacked. And the principal said, "How do I know you didn't leave home like that? I didn't see anybody hit you. And if they did, we didn't ask you to come here. So go back where you belong." So I says, "I just need to use the phone to call my dad." He said, "No, you can't use the phone." So across the street was a payphone. At that time, you put a dime in a payphone, and I called my dad, and I told Dad to come and pick me up, that I had been beaten. So he came and picked me up, took me to the only black doctor in town, and the doctor stitched me up. He said, "You've been beat pretty badly." So he said, "You need to stay home for a while before you go back to school." So that's what I did. Well, I told Dad, I said, "Dad, I'm not going back." I said, "I'm just not going back." He said, "You don't have to go back." I stayed home, I think, 3 or 4 days. I said, "Take me back to school." He said, "I thought you weren't going back." I said, "You know what? They're going to have to kill me. I can't let them win. I'm going back. And whatever it takes, if they want to beat me up again, whatever it takes, I'm going back." And I went back. It was worse. My class, I'm convinced, had taken a pact that they did not want 1965 to record the history of the first black finishing. So whatever they could do, they would do so that I would have a horrible time, and then I would just decide to drop out of school. And not only were the kids, but the teachers as well, they would not grade anything that I did. If it was a paper, they would put an F on it. If it was assignment, they would put an F on it. So I remember once when my dad and I met with the principal, and he says, "You putting these F's on and not even reading it." And the principal says, "Well, that's what my teacher says, and I don't have to justify whatever she does." So my dad knew the chairman of the English department at the University of Florida. He says, "I'm going to get them." So I had to write a paper. He took it to the chairman of the English department. They edited the paper before I turned it in. They still put an F on it. I did not have. I sat in a class for an entire year in silence because no one wanted to be seen talking to me. So it was the most isolated year of my life. And it was isolated on two fronts. I went to school, nobody talked to me. Then all of my friends on the other side alienated me because they felt that I was better than them now that I'm going to the white school. So I lost my black friends, and I had no friends on the other side. So it was a total year of isolation. My brother was having the time of his life at the all-black school, Lincoln High School. He was busy with the band and everything. I could not go to any activities because the FBI said that they could not guarantee safety. We could not go basketball, football games. I could not go on the class trip, could not do anything that necessitated me being in a crowd. And as a result of that, it was just an isolated, horrible year. I graduated, yes. Now, when it was time to graduate, my brother and my graduation was on the same day. So I begged my parents, please don't make me go to graduation. And my mother said, all the hell you've been through this year, you're going to graduation. So I had heard the rumor around the campus, well, we didn't kill her yet, but we got her at graduations. I was horrified about going to graduation, but did not want to tell my parents what I had been hearing. So the graduation was at the University of Florida at the McConnell Center. And they had evidently every policeman in Gainesville at that time. They could have robbed any bank in Gainesville because everybody was at the graduation. And I was afraid to get in the line, but I saw all of the police and I says, I know that they aren't going to try anything with all these policemen here. So I got in the line and there was not an incident that happened there. Every day I would go to class, at my seat, I could expect to find dead rats, roaches, little snakes, and they would put tacks in my seat. If I didn't look at my seat and just sat down, then I'd have to get right up. And so when I got to graduation, the first thing I did was to look at my seat to see if, in fact, there were any tacks. And that's the first day that there were no tacks and there were no roaches or rats or little snakes around. So I sat there, but I was very nervous and very scared.
I'm just curious, after all these years, has anyone from that class ever reached out to you to apologize or say?
Well, what has happened is the 25th class reunion, I was living in Philadelphia, and they called my mom and asked me, please, to come home, and they would pay for me to come, and they wanted me to come to the class reunion. My mother begged me to come. I just couldn't do it. Well, they had the 50th anniversary 5 years ago. And then there was an email chain that they kept asking, please come to the 50th. We really want to see you. And I anguished over it. I really did. But I don't know anybody. What would I do there? I don't even know the person who beat me up. I said, what could I do? And I decided I can't do it. Well, the 55th is this year. And they have written me, they've sent me all the information. And they've said, LaVon, would you please, just please come. The wound, it took me a long time to heal from that situation. When I left Gainesville High, I had to be very prayerful not to hate all white people. It was a very, very bad experience just to know I was treated that way because of the pigment of my skin. And so I left there and I went to a historically black institution, and I used that opportunity to really heal. And then I used that opportunity. I became an advocate for voter registration, and I began to speak for those who could not speak for themselves, because I promised myself after a full year of being silent that I'd never be silent again.
And so tell me about the book that you've written. I know you've written about this before, but recently you've written this book, but it's for children. A book about this for children.
Let me tell you how this book came about. I spoke at the League of Women Voters, and I gave them my story. And after I finished my story, Erica Dunlap, who was Miss America in 2004, says to me, "You need to write a children's book." I said, "A children's book?" She said, "About this story?" She said, "Yes." I says, "I've never told my story to children. I don't know, because even when I tell it to my kids and they're grown, oh, Mom, that is, oh." So I then, for Black History, was invited to go to speak at Lake Jim Elementary to tell my story. And as much as I love to talk, I anguished as to what am I going to say to these children. So my brother, who'd been an educator for 35 years, I called him and said, "How do I introduce this story?" So I went to everybody that I knew who was an educator to ask them, how do I introduce this story? And they began to tell me how to introduce the story to kids. So I started to introduce my story. I went and I got 2 eggs, a white egg and a brown egg. And I began to say, "What is this?" It's a white egg. "What is this?" A brown egg. "What's the difference in these eggs?" There's no difference, it's only the color. And then I took it from the egg and to tell my story. The kids were so engaged by my story. I was there all day, and I must have gotten 30 questions. "Mrs. Bracey, why don't you write a children's book so that we can read about your story?" And I'd heard it before, and now I went home and I told my husband, I said, "Those kids asked me to write a children's book." He says, "Well, you've heard it before, now why don't you do it?" So I wrote the book. Then I took the words of the book and I took it to some teachers that I knew. I went back to Lake Jim School, and I gave it to the teachers. And they worked on making the language children friendly. And then I had to find an illustrator that would illustrate the pictures of exactly what happened and how the story came about. It took me about 2 years, but I decided to tell the story to children because our children don't know our history. And if we don't tell them, they won't know. And so often people want to ignore history, and what I want to do is I want them to remember history. So I wrote a children's book.